Welcome. Welcome to another 9 to 9 meeting. This is the first meeting in a while in which we're not doing Psalms. We had 6 meetings of Psalms, to my slight amazement. Just a second. Ilan, can you pin me? Oh, I can pin myself. Never mind. Can you see me, everybody? Can you hear me? Can you see me? Just like indicate somehow. Thank you. Okay. Let me know if something goes awry. Okay, so we're now that we finished with Psalms, or at least with this cycle of Psalms, we're hopping straight into another book of an unusual genre, which is Mishlei, the Book of Wisdom. There's several books in the Bible that are called the Books of Wisdom. Mishlei is one of the more prominent among them. Iyov, that we will do in our next meeting, another. Kohelet is a third one. 2 of them, Mishlei and Kohelet, are attributed traditionally to King Shlomo, who is described in the Book of Kings as the wisest of all men, etc., etc., etc. And this is presented as the fruits of his labor, even though in the text itself, different speeches, it's divided into different speeches, and they start with attributions to people other than Shlomo at times. So there's all kinds of midrashim about how to make sense of it. It is that Shlomo collected all of these things of wisdom, that he was the source, and then it was different schools of thought that developed it. We're not going to go into that. This is its own course, and we're not in a one class, in 1 hour, we're definitely not going to go there. We're also not going to be able to cover the entirety of the book. We're going to focus on several key concepts and try and puzzle them out. And I think before we delve in, and I feel like it's worth mentioning, not just for me personally, it's worth mentioning because I think it's a difficulty many people experience when faced, and feel free to tell me if you're one of them or not, is that while it includes a lot of very appealing aphorisms, it sounds nice, we all, even without knowing it, sometimes would recognize some of the sentences, some of the statements, because they became idiomatic, and it's all very beautiful and it all makes sense. And yet there's something very alienating about this book, because after getting used to books that either tell a story or prophecy some future in a clear way and have a certain sense of impending doom about them, or with Psalms, shorter pieces, poems, but still poems that tell us something poignant and clearly stand alone as their own pieces, suddenly we wander into this book. It's filled to the brim with beautiful ideas and beautiful statements, but it's very hard to see a pattern. It's very hard to feel, where is it taking us? What is it trying to say to us? What is it? Why do we need this collection of beautiful sentences? What is it trying to tell us? Does anybody else ever experience that? Ever experienced it looking into Mishlei? Well, we'll see how you experience it today. This was definitely my experience. So before we start delving into particulars, I want to make one very clear, kind of not clear analysis, but rather tackle head first one of the basic questions that we have to ask ourselves when we enter this book, which is, how is it like the other books and how is it different? In what way does it belong in the same corpus of ideas and styles that we've seen so far? And in what way the new and different style indicative of also a different message, a different truth, a different way of looking at the world? So instead of just talking about it at length, let's just start reading a little bit. We'll taste a little bit, some statements of Mishlei. And what I hope to show you is that it both shares elements of the biblical corpus we've seen so far and strays from them. So here we are in the source sheet in box 1, and I'm reading a quote from Proverbs 6:23. I'll read it both in Hebrew and English because the Hebrew is just so beautiful. Kiner mitzvah v'torah or v'derech chaim tochechot musar. For the commandment is a lamp, the teaching is a light, and the way to life is the rebuke that disciplines. Now, in English, the teaching, in Hebrew, it's Torah. And throughout the book of Mishlei, the word Torah is used clearly to express both a connection with the Torah itself, but also a general sense of a teaching, a truth that's being taught to us. When you read this sentence, when you read this statement, what would you say is the connection, just based on this one sentence? What's the connection between the book of Mishlei and what came before it, in your opinion? There's no right and wrong answers. We're just opening up the topic a little bit. Anybody wants to share something? Let's read.
I know.
Yes.
If I guess just looking at this particular as sort of a big picture, to give a little bit of a bigger picture point of view of the the Torah way of life.
Mm-hmm.
To look back, to step back a little bit from the all the specifics of mitzvot, etc., and to talk about sort of the the benefits or the positive effect of mitzvot and Torah.
The big picture purpose, right? Is that what you're kind of getting for? Yeah.
Purpose?
Yeah.
What do you mean by purpose, Rebecca?
That, well, the idea of a lamp and light is the idea of guide, like a guide. A light illuminates. And so in life, in life, what a Torah way of life will enhance, what it does to one's life, that it illuminates, it enhances, it gives purpose, I think is where kind of where Joyce was going at.
It's interesting. Yes, somebody's saying something? I can't see all of you at once, so I'm not sure if one said something or not. Speak up if you do want to, but I'll continue for now and say that just to recapture what you're saying, what both Joyce and Rebecca are saying, I think, is that until now, at least when we read the Torah, it was as if we were in the kishkes of the Torah. We look, this is allowed, this is not allowed, this is right, this is wrong, do this, don't do that, this happens when you do this happens when you do that. And as almost somebody took all of it together and set it aside and looks at it as an object and says, what does that do to our life as a whole? Not the nitty-gritty details, just as a whole, what its value in our life. And as Becca pointed out, I think it's very telling that the first thing we're told is lamp, is an image of light. And then the teaching is light directly. Oh, because as we will see, and back to that theme shortly, a lot of what Mishlei has to say about the Torah, about the Jewish way of life, about God's will, is that it illuminates, that it gives us clarity. Hold on to this light, it gives us something. You know what, I'll skip ahead a little bit and show you one of the places where it says it very powerfully. Just a moment. This is a longish piece, but we'll read it slowly and carefully because it will come into play again later. From Proverbs in box number, sorry, for those that have it printed, box number 4, Mishlei 4, 10-19. My son, heed and take in my words, and you will have many years of life. Instruct you in the way of wisdom. I guide you in straight courses. You will walk without making stride. When you run, you will not stumble. Hold fast to discipline. Do not let go. Keep it. It is your life. Now they're going to talk about the bad path, the path of the wicked. Do not enter on the path of the wicked. Do not walk on the way of evil men. Avoid it, do not pass through it. Turn away from it, pass it by. For they cannot sleep unless they have done evil, unless they make someone fall, they are robbed of sleep. They eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of lawlessness. We'll get back to this in a bit. But now let's focus on these 2 verses, and this is where I was going. The path of the righteous is like radiant sunlight, ever brightening until noon. The way of the wicked is all darkness. They do not know what will make them stumble. In other words, that image of Torah, of the teaching, of the mitzvah as light, is not just a matter of goodness, it's a matter of clarity, it's a matter of being able to avoid mistakes, being able to avoid dangers, because you have something guiding you in your life. What I'd like to ask you, if when you look at this text and at the other one we read, what do you think the text means here, where it says in verse 18, ever brightening until noon? In Hebrew, it's holech va'or ad nachon hayom. It's not just telling you it's light, it's also telling you that there's a certain gradual growth of it. What do you make of that? What does it make you think of? What does it evoke for you? What's the difference? Let's put it this way. What's the difference between a lamp and a sunrise? Just in life.
We turn on the lamp, or we can control the lamp. The sunlight is natural. It comes, it goes, each day. But the lamp is something that we as humans have power, have the ability to increase, decrease, etc.
So that's interesting, because he's used both of these images in different places, right? Both the artificial, something that requires us, but also the something that happens in itself. Cheryl, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I mean, sort of similar in the sense that the sun, I think the imagery of the sunrise, sunset is sort of a sense of urgency, and that like we better follow this way now before kind of the sun sets and we lose our opportunity. We have to take advantage of the light, see the light, take advantage, go on the correct path, because otherwise kind of will go the dark side.
Oh, I actually thought kind of the opposite, because this doesn't talk about setting. This is just talking about, a little light that builds and builds and builds, towards noon, whereas, the lamp, it's just, you turn it on, it has some steady amount of light, I suppose, until the fuel goes out. But I actually thought it was more grandiose. It was
maybe more of a pessimist.
Building and getting more and more. The more mitzvot you do or the Torah you learn, it's more of a virtuous cycle of increase.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I want to say that you can read the imagery of light, and Donna, I'll be with you in a second. I think Donna raised her head.
Yes.
But just a second. Donna have her, but just a second. I just want to say that whether you think that the image of natural light or the image of artificial light is more kind of rich with the dread of what happens when the light goes off, or when you either run out of materials to burn, or when the sun starts drawing down, something that comes through both of these examples is that imagery of light is always a limited comfort, because it reminds us of the shadow. And in Mishlei, that's something that repeats constantly. Just like in the passage we just read in Mishlei 4, it describes both the path of the righteous and the path of the wicked. There's a constant comparison. There's this constant sense of, this is the well-lit path. This is a path you should take. This is what you should do. Be advised, this is what happens if you don't. There's always shadows lurking. Donna, you wanted to add something?
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the difference for me between the lamp and the sun rising is that when I think of lamp, I think of it as like perfection, like it's always on. And then when I think of sunrise, well, the sun goes down, but then it comes up. It's like, it's not perfection. It's like a constant changing thing. So it makes me think that, sometimes we feel close to God with our actions, but sometimes we feel we're very far. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful, that there's a certain almost a tide to it. You're pointing that there's almost tide, and I think there's also comfort in that. And that's another theme that lurks there in the background of Mishlei, that there is a way up. That Mishlei constantly emphasizes that there's consequences, that you can't escape the consequences. If you choose a certain way, it leads to a certain path, and you can't just escape it, but there's a way to correct that path. And what Donna is pointing out is that the imagery of sunrise has some promise of that as well. Anne, I thought you wanted to say something. Am I right? Anne Geller?
Yes. I wondered about the phrase "nachon hayom." Is that an idiom? Because it has this sense of rightness built into the word, and it has this image of the light growing, as we've said, till it's an overwhelming force. And I think in the artificial light in the first verse, that has the image of both ner and or. I think here it's a statement about the pieces and the whole, that like our individual actions build up to the whole of the or. Whereas here it's just using it differently. But I was curious about the phrase "nachon hayom."
So where is it? Oh no, it's down. Just a minute. The expression "nachon hayom." I didn't read all the interpretations, what the commentators have to say. I recommend it. I would be curious myself to hear more about it later. But I do want to point out that in the Tanakh Hebrew, "nachon" has less to do with rightness and more to do, here it is, "nachon hayom." It has more to do with being prepared, being ready. In what in modern Hebrew we're calling being mukhan. The food is ready in the oven, or it's in a sense that it's the light is rising until the day is prepared. The day is fully ready. It's fully there. There's a certain fullness to it, but also hiding within this kind of memory of fullness, there's a sense that it's getting ready for something, because nechon also it evokes imagery of people who are nechonim lakrav, being ready for a battle, for example. It's readiness. It's not just completion like a fruit is complete. It's readiness for an action, which again adds another nuance to our understanding of what it is to be on the path of the righteous, which is it's not just in and of itself. It's like every stage adds more illumination, adds more knowledge, more clarity. But then as you go, every stage also prepares you for something further. It's an ever-ending kind of progress. It's not, and that's another thing that's very strong in the description there, that there's this sense not just of a lamp that's already lit, but of this gradual growth. I want to also point out that the word path repeats itself an awful lot in this book. Let's look at it again here. So here, obviously, in the part we just read in Mishlei 4, we saw that we talk about it as the way of wisdom, the road of wisdom that one should go on, and not the path of the wicked, for example. But also in the shorter quote that we saw above, it says, "For the commandment is a lamp, the teaching is a light, and the way to life, the road, the path to life is the rebuke that disciplines." And this is something that comes through over and over and over again in this book, that it's not one decision. You're not choosing once between right and wrong. You're choosing over and over and over again. Yes, Naomi.
I was just wondering if there's also a metaphor to life in this. Very often, if life is like a day, the sun rises and then the sun sets. However, even as you grow, as you learn, the sun radiates within you with knowledge, with mitzvot. As you get older and the sun goes down, the lamp in you stays lit from the knowledge and learning and mitzvot that you have done and continue to do.
I like that. I like that a lot. You're saying that the image of the lamp, by being artificial in a sense, also gives us more power, because it means that we have the power to self-fashion ourselves. We have the power to create light in the world. And by the way, I don't remember who said it before about the relationship between, I think, Anne, between light and lamp in the first quote we looked at. So you can think of it as light is a piece of the light, lamp is a piece of the light. You can think of it as a lot of lamps create light, or you can think of it as we light the lamps from something external, from the teaching, and create it. And I think both readings are legitimate in this case, but as we will go into more quotes, we will see that one of the running principles or running truths of Mishlei is that knowledge comes first. Not mitzvah, meaning mitzvah, action, no worries, Eileen. Mitzvah, action, doing the right thing is found in its foundation, reliant upon or dependent upon knowing what is right on some level. And the concept, the central concept that keeps repeating itself throughout the book as the most important thing to grasp is not doing right, it's chokhmah, wisdom. And chokhmah is always associated with irat Hashem, fear of God. It's not some chokhmah that we figure out with our own mind, it's chokhmah that we accept from God and then build upon, and it gradually lights up, illuminates what's right, and then the mitzvah can come out of it. And this leads us very much directly to what makes Mishlei such an interesting commentary on the Torah. Because as we saw in this quote that we just looked at, the first one, Mishlei kind of takes the entire Torah as an object and looks at it, but it does the same thing also to particulars. For example, let's look at the second quote here. It's from Proverbs 11. False scales are an abomination to the Lord. An honest weight pleases him. Or let's look at Proverbs 20. False weights and false measures, both are an abomination to the Lord. So it takes a very, very specific mitzvah, and not once but twice repeats it. And twice it explains to us that God hates it. It's something we shouldn't do because God hates it. But it takes the same idea that's from the Torah, that God doesn't want us to do something, but it changes how we look at it. Because instead of staying in that point and telling us God doesn't want you to do it, so don't do it, it tells us if you live the kind of life where you don't do these abominable things and you do good things, what will happen is you will be happy. You will have a good life as an individual. And this is where the book of Mishlei really kind of strikes its own bold path that's parallel, that's rooted in the Torah, but is also different. Because in the Torah, the explanations we hear are more things like this. Let's look at this quote from Exodus, right? Now then, if you will obey me faithfully and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all people. Indeed, all the earth is mine. You shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. In other words, the things you're supposed to do and the things I'm doing to you are, one, national in nature. The rewards and the punishments are more as a nation than for us as an individual. And secondly, they're all in context of this covenant. They're all in the context of this purpose of life that has to do with meaning individuals will be, I'll take a step back and explain. Individuals pay the price for sins. There's no question. You don't need to read Mishlei for that. You read the Torah and it's full of stories and explanations about how if individuals sin, they get punished or will get punished. But the reason that's given, why God creates this whole system of rewards and punishment, is because of the covenant that he has with us as a people. And the reasons behind different aspects of the covenant also have to do with our national faith. For example, let's look at Deuteronomy 10 here. You too must befriend the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Befriending the stranger is the right thing to do because of our national history. Justice shall you pursue, that you may thrive and occupy the land that the Lord your God is giving you. Justice is something we should do so that we will have the promised land that's part of our covenant. And then comes Mishlei and says, all this is nice and good, and definitely the source of everything is doing the mitzvah and learning the teaching, and you should not do whatever is abominable in the eyes of the Lord. But here's the breakdown of why it's good for you. And it says, for example, in Proverbs 11, sorry, my tongue is, the Proverbs 11, the righteousness of the blameless man smoothest his way, but the wicked man is felled by his wickedness. Just do it, because then your path will be smooth. And if you don't do it, you will fail personally. Or in verse 12, a man gets his fill of good from the fruit of the speech. One is repaid in kind for one's deeds. In many ways, when we look through the book of Mishlei, we see time and time again the same idea repeating itself. Do it for your own good. Do it because the well-lit path of wisdom, of doing wisdom, of learning wisdom, and then following it up with doing what's right, will lead you to a good life. Mishlei, in a sense, steps out of the shadow of the Torah that gives it its meaning, that gives it its source, that gives it its specific of what's right and what's wrong, and stands out there not as a book for Jews, but rather as a book for humanity. And this is very striking, because it's relying on the same content, it's relying on the same mitzvot that are part of a national covenant in the books of Moses, but it turns them into advice that transcends it, that is just for your good as an individual, no matter who you are, where you're from, and what you want to do. And it doesn't only break the bounds of the national story, it also breaks class bounds, it breaks gender bounds, it breaks educational level bounds, because what the book keeps repeating over and over again is that everyone can benefit from it in different ways and at different stages. In fact, this is how the book starts. Let's look at that together. The book starts in the very, very beginning by telling us thus. I'm in box number 4. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for learning wisdom and discipline, for understanding words of discernment, for acquiring the discipline for success, righteousness, justice, and equity. For endowing the simple with shrewdness, the young with knowledge and foresight. The wise man hearing them will gain more wisdom. The discerning man will learn to be adroit. For understanding proverb and epigram, the words of the wise and the riddles, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and discipline. In other words, the first entry into the book tells us who are the people that can benefit from it. Can you point out who are these people here? Just like, let's look at it together. Who are the people who can benefit from it? Let's look at verse 4. In verse 4, who's benefiting from it?
The young.
The young,
Wise.
yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
The young. And in Hebrew, it's called lena'al, for a young boy, like the teenager, basically.
Mhm.
Who
The
else?
simple. The
The
simple.
simple,
The simple, right?
simple.
Yeah. Who in verse 5 benefits from it?
Chacham.
Chacham, the wise man, yes. Who else?
And Navon.
Navon.
Phone.
Navon, right? Navon is, we traditionally understand it, that it's someone who understands something from something. Not just somebody who can learn knowledge and absorb it, but somebody who can look at something and kind of get the implications, get where it's going. So even he or she can get something beyond. And what are they getting? And this is another interesting thing. Each of them is getting something else. They're not getting the same thing. The simple gets some shrewdness. The boy gets some knowledge and foresight. Here, it's interesting. The word for foresight here is mezima, which in modern Hebrew is always negative. It means like plots, evil plots. But here it's not. Here in biblical Hebrew, it's the ability to plan ahead, which if we think back to the imagery of the path of the righteous, resonates, because the path of the righteous is all about having the light that shows you where you're going so you don't stumble about in the darkness like the fool. And then at every stage of the way, the wisdom can add something else to you. But don't forget, the root is always the same. The root is always the fear of God. The Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Yirat Hashem rashit dat. And the commentators, when they look at this pasuk here, Yirat Hashem rashit dat, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, interpret it to say that interpret it to say that none of those advancements, none of those moments of being at a certain stage and getting some wisdom and becoming a bit more than you were before that can happen without a basic act of acceptance. Because as long as we don't accept that God has something to give us, as long as we think that we can achieve wisdom through purely human means, then we're like the wicked stumbling upon in the dark road. We think we have light, and maybe we'll even stumble upon light in truth. But how will we be able to tell if it's a true light or a misleading light? How will we be able to tell if it leads us upon the right path or it's just another shadow that's going to lead us down into unseen and hidden dangers? There has to be some moment at the heart of it all where we accept God's authority, and from that we can already use our own means to build upon it a path that is well lit and correct and doesn't lead us into danger. Now, what does that mean for us is a difficult question. It's definitely not how we're trained to think as Western thinkers, let's put it this way. It's definitely not the natural philosophical trend. It's not when we say wisdom in English or even philosophy, philosophia in Greek, we don't mean an act of acceptance. We mean an act of digging, of seeking, of ripping things apart until we find something within them. But the Mishlei path is different. The Mishlei path says wisdom is extremely important and it can serve everybody at every stage of their life and improve their life immensely. But at its heart, there has to be at least one moment of acceptance, of fearing God, of accepting something that's beyond the self. Remind me at the end, I'm presenting it here as this kind of grand contrast between Greek philosophy and Jewish tradition. And I think it isn't. I think that actually, if you read carefully, you will find that also Plato and Aristotle and the great thinkers of the West had a similar impulse. And they didn't define it in religious terms. They didn't have our chokhmah, our Irat Hashem to define it with, but they work their way around a similar sense that before you seek, there has to be something else. So remind me, this is a side note and I'll get to it at the end. Remind me if I stray away from that in my not so well lit path here. But for now, let's continue. And I want to focus on one chapter, chapter 9 in Mishlei. There's so many beautiful things to focus on, but I want to focus, since we're talking about how the basis of it all is wisdom, I want to focus on chapter 9 because in chapter 9, the speaker anthropomorphizes wisdom and foolishness. And he presents them almost as two women who invite people into their house and offer them certain things. And in a sense, this fable, this description, this humanizing description of wisdom and wickedness, being succinct and short and not too long, still captures a lot of the insights that really run through the entire book and helps us understand how and why a particular path is called the wise path, the path of light, the path of righteousness, while a particular path is called the opposite, the mirror image of it all, and how we can tell them apart. So let's look at that. I'm going to start here in box number 2. And we're going to start reading about how wisdom brings guests to her house. Wisdom has built her house. She has hewn her 7 pillars. She has prepared the feast, mixed the wine, and set the table. What do we know about wisdom just from these psukim? What can we already tell about this imaginary character, in your opinion?
She's industrious.
She's industrious.
She's busy and does a lot of preparatory work.
Exactly. Anybody wants to add something, or should we continue?
I was just
Yes?
wondering what the 7 pillars are referring to.
Yeah, it's I would have to teach like several classes about specific for to open it up. I would recommend just going to Sefaria later and opening the commentaries on it. And there's so many different understandings. It's this idea of the 7 pillars has become idiomatic, basically. It's the kind of entered our language, it entered our culture. But even here, the commentators are asking, what does it mean? Why are there 7 pillars? What are the 7 pillars? I can't give an answer to that. It's worth looking at all the different answers and seeing what you can take from that speaks to you.
Okay. I'm not sure if it's an ominous beginning or if it's a good beginning.
In what way?
Well, I'm not sure if something bad is going to happen, that she's sort of setting a trap, that she's got the feast and the wine, the table, everything is ready. She's ready to pounce on you. Or is she ready to welcome you because the feast is ready and the wine is ready and the table is ready? So it's like you've gotten ready for company and you're waiting for them to come. So I'm not sure what's going to happen when I just read.
But I think that's what it is, in that it's a sense that it's prepared, but then you have this sense that something has to enter, and it doesn't just happen automatically, like it's all there and ready. And I think the picture is really painted how it's very much, it's kind of almost perfect and all set out, but this isn't going to just happen in some, like it's waiting for another player, right? I sense that ominousness, right? And you're not quite sure where it's going, but it doesn't happen on it. There's something about to happen, and then another player has to be part of that. You have that real sense, right? Right.
Which, by the way, goes back to what we were discussing in the very beginning about how ner is an artificial thing, and there's a certain sense that you have to be part of it. It doesn't just come to you. And also the sense that nechon hayom, what Anne pointed out before, that it's an interesting word, and I said that the words it means being ready. The light makes you ready. Wisdom makes you ready for something, but then something has to happen. There's a certain sense that the readiness in and of itself is not complete. Spoiler alert, it may sound ominous, but the ending is a happy ending for those who end up going to this house. However, the same chapter also shows us the ominous fate of those who go to a different house. I'll get to shortly. But let's see what happens when wisdom finishes preparing the table, okay? Just a minute. Well, let's go keep reading a little bit and then we'll continue the discussion. Wisdom doesn't simply sit at home and wait for us to come. No, she has sent out her maids to announce on behalf of the town, let the simple enter here. Those devoid of sense, she says, come, eat my food and drink my wine that I have mixed. Give up simpleness and walk in the way of understanding. To correct a scoffer or rebuke a wicked man for his blemish is to call down abuse of self. Do not rebuke a scoffer, for he will hate you. Reprove a wise man, and he will love you. Instruct a wise man, and he will grow wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will gain in learning. The interesting thing is, the wisdom here first calls to people and says, whoever wants to learn, come. But then she also gives us a little bit of a description of her way of doing business. And she tells us, I don't bother rebuking those who don't want it. I don't bother forcing myself on people. The house is here. The house is ready. Those 7 pillars, whatever they are, and boy, can they be a lot of things, are here. The wine is in the goblets. It's up to you. I'm not going to scoff at you or rebuke or those who are, we're just going to make fun of it. Come or don't come. Now it's your call. What do you make of that? Of the fact that wisdom goes and announces all of that and invites people like that? I'll open it so we can see the text together. But yes, Donna Haber.
Yes. It makes me think that the first thing that I thought was that in Judaism we don't proselytize, in the sense that you can speak about what you think is the truth, but you can share your wisdom with others, but you don't force it on other people. That's what it makes me think. But at the same time, it also the fact that she's going out in the streets talking about it, it makes me think that we are supposed to share. So let's say something amazing happened in our lives and we can see that it was totally God that helped us go through it, we are supposed to share with other people. So
Mhm.
those
You're
are the
saying
main difference.
you're saying that it's almost like wisdom becomes a role model, what we should do.
Not necessarily, she's just living up to her truth.
Mhm.
So she's sharing her experience and what she deems to be, God's hand in her life. And if other people are going to receive it, that's great. But she's not going out there making them see what she's seeing. Does it make sense?
Yeah, no, I think it makes a lot of sense. I guess the complementary question to that is what would happen if she were to force them? She tells us it's not going to work. You can't. It's just
Right.
pointless. People have to seek it out. There's a certain element of wanting to hold this lamp in your hand. It goes back to that little moment of acceptance we talked about before, that you can learn and learn and learn and learn, but for it to make a difference, for it to be more than just knowledge that's piled up in your brain, but rather to be a way of living, there has to be this little moment of acceptance, of choice, of saying, I want to be on this path and I'm willing to accept what it is to be on this path,
Right.
which connects to another word that repeats itself throughout the book, which is the word musar. Musar, I mean, in modern Hebrew, we call musar as just the word for ethics, for morality. But in Old Hebrew, musar has to do with isurim, with suffering. And a lot of times, musar, what it's supposed to is those learnings that we learn when our parents beat us when we're kids, like the corporal punishment as children, musar shivto, right? That the parent is supposed to beat the child. But it's not only that, there's also musar heskel, which is the musar we learn not through suffering of being beaten, but through being forced to learn, to become more educated. So the word musar keeps coming back here throughout the book, and it kind of hints to us that, again, we have to accept life is offering us all these things. Wisdom is hiding there, or not hiding, it's calling out to us loudly, but we have to be willing to accept it. We have to make it our own somehow. Rebecca, you wanted to add something?
I wanted just I mean, Musar in that context has a very negative context. I often think of Musar as, heritage, possibly, that thing that's passed down. It doesn't, not necessarily in a harsh way, but that tradition that we inherit, that is passed, learned mimetically, possibly.
Yeah, so traditionally it really has these two meanings, and some commentators point out that in the book of Mishlei, sometimes we're talked about musar shivto. Shevet is a stick. So sometimes we get about the musar, the learning we can get out of being hurt, out of pain, out of punishment. And sometimes it's musar haskel. Haskel is the process of becoming more masculine, more educated, more informed. And it's the musar that we learn this way. And on some level, we're given both options. Kind of, if we learn it the easy way, maybe we won't need the hard way. And you can think about it not just in terms of educating children. I mean, now we don't really do, most of us don't do corporal punishment anymore, but when you think about it as life, there's a certain sense of, if you can learn your lessons fast without a lot of suffering, maybe when difficult things come your way, you'll be better prepared. Whereas if you don't, if you ignore the easy lessons, the easy pickings that come at a time of ease and comfort and prosperity, then when things go bad, you're going to be unprepared and you will have to learn very painfully and quickly. But I don't want to delay too much on this concept. I'm sorry, yeah? Rebecca?
No. I was just going to say, it's interesting. That reading is interesting in terms of Musar Avicha v'Torah, Musar Shema b'nei Musar Avicha, Al titosh Torah.
Yeah. And there's the traditional commentators, I'll talk about it, that the father traditionally teaches more harshly and the mother more through kind of loving methods. And on some level, everybody needs both. Make of it what you will. Yes, Anne.
I think it's really interesting that she has it all set out. That it's not like, come, let us learn together, as if whoever she's inviting in, then we can make wisdom together. That's it. She's got it. You have to come and accept it from her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting because I think it's important to remember that this is a metaphor. There isn't anybody who can give us everything that she's giving us. It's not like, oh, and then you'll go and a person will do all of that for you. That's perfect wisdom in its metaphorical sense can do it. But it's kind of an interesting question. Is that the attitude we should adopt when we go to a teacher or not? It's not I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the text is there.
Is that what we're supposed to be as learners? Are we gaining a wisdom that's beyond us? Or are we part of the process of acquiring wisdom? Is it a developing human involved process or not?
So I would say that this image seems definitely, you're right. This I didn't think of it like that before, but you're right. This image pushes more to you just accept it as much as you can. But then the image of follow light and build upon it until there's a bigger and bigger light, and a lot of other images like that emphasize much more human involvement. And even here in this story where wisdom gives it all to you, you just have to take it, still the choice is yours. And this is important, that whether it's more of acceptance or more of creation, there's no question that this, again, is a repeated theme, that both the responsibility and the ultimate and this is the chidush kind of Mishlei here, the responsibility are first and foremost a matter for an individual, not for a nation, not for a group, not for a class, not even for a family, for an individual. Because as an individual, either accept it for wisdom, pursue wisdom, and slowly add more and more clarity to your life and build upon it, or you don't. And you will be the one to benefit from this more clarity or not benefit from it. And that's the other side of the parable. I said that there is an ominous part. Let's jump straight to the ominous part just so we don't miss out on that, because who wants to miss out on ominous things these days? Just a minute here. After telling us about how wisdom set out and created everything and built everything, the text goes and tells us that stupidity, blindness did the same thing. The stupid woman here, and I'm in box 7 and Proverbs 9. The stupid woman bustles about. She is simple and knows nothing. And bustles, in Hebrew it's homiyah. It's actually making a lot of noise, but it's noise that doesn't add to anything comprehensible. She sits in the doorway of her house or in a chair at the heights of town, calling to all the wayfarers who go about their own affairs. Let the simple enter here, and to those devoid of sense, she says, stolen waters are sweet, and bread eaten furtively is tasty. He does not know that the shades are there, that her guests are in the depths of Sheol. So before we analyze it, what's missing here compared to the wisdom's house? Both of them call out to guests, but there's a very obvious step that wisdom took and foolishness didn't. What is that?
Preparation.
Exactly. There's nothing prepared. She's just inviting all these people, but she doesn't have anything. Perhaps the content of her message hints at what she's offering them. She says, stolen water, sweet, and bread eaten furtively is tasty. If she has anything to offer, it's only whatever she scavenges last second, because you said before that the first thing we see about wisdom is that it's industrious. She's the opposite of industrious. She has nothing to offer. She just scrambles something from here, something from there, and says, here, come, take, it's good for you. And like Hansel and Gretel, if you take it, you end up in the oven. You end up being devoured by foolishness because you choose this path. What I think is very beautiful about this mashal, this whole comparison, is that it emphasizes the fact that before we even talk about what exactly wisdom teaches us and what exactly foolishness teaches us, because it doesn't say, we're not really exposed to what happens once a person goes into their house. What is the content of the lesson they are given, right? We don't know that. Before we even go into the content, something about the way, the method should set us off, should tell us whether this is a good place to go to learn from or a bad place to go to learn from. And the method of wisdom is to prepare things, to make sure that things are set, that things are in place, that you can follow from A to B to C, that things are in the proper order. And that's another thing that brings the image of a path to mind, that it's not enough to just have this good thing, that good thing, that good thing. There's a certain methodology. A kid becomes a little wiser, then teenager becomes a little wiser, then the smart, the chacham becomes wiser, then the navon becomes wiser. You go from step to step to step to step, building upon it. Whereas foolishness, before we even know anything about the content of what it has to tell us, we know that it doesn't really matter, because all it can offer us are these snatches, mayim gduvim, stolen water. It could be that the water itself is okay. It could be that it'll offer us a truth, but it'll offer it us in such a way that we don't earn it. We don't go through the process of learning that makes us able to appreciate and drink and live in ourselves through it. Because that's what it means to steal water. You didn't earn it. You didn't do the steps that lead you to it. Authors often in their talks about the craft of writing fiction, they talk about earning the happy ending. They say that if your characters don't go through certain character development and don't live through certain challenges, and the happy ending doesn't somehow stem from the fact that they dealt with all those difficult things and grew enough to stand up to them and change something and earned it. Mr. Darcy changing himself for Elizabeth Bennet comes to mind, just, for example, or you can think of any example. If you do all of that, then the ending feels real. And if you don't, if the heroes just do their own thing and then, oh, Deus ex machina, happy ending, everything works out, everything is happy, the reader feels cheated. The reader kind of feels the artificiality of it, and the basic contract between writer and reader, the contract that says, I will help you pretend as if the story is real for a few hours and you don't have to think about the fact that it's contrived, is broken. So in a sense, what we're watching here is the fact that we have to earn our own happy endings, not just as authors, but also as human beings. That goodness, happiness, rightness, truth, they're all out there and people can stumble into them and grab onto them and use them and get something out of them. But if you want to really live a life of these things, a lifetime, walk a path of these things and not just have them for a moment and then have them snatched away, you have to be methodical. You have to start with acceptance, to start with Hashem, start with some vision of where you're going, build upon it, and reach more and more and more light. And just to round it up, I want to finish with 2 points, 2 ideas. One is an image, and it's an image of Stephen Covey, the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, used in the introduction to his book, where he tries to explain why a lot of self-help books fail. And he says a lot of self-help books have all these great ideas, and they list all these ideas, and they tell you it's a quick fix, just do this. Think positively, talk to people in more empathetic ways, have a to-do list and go by your to-do list. Just do all those things and your life will be good, your life will be great. But those ideas don't try and understand in what way the fundamental way that you look at the world is either right or wrong. And because of that, if you're looking at the world wrong, if your basic understanding of what it is to live in the world is wrong, it doesn't matter how positive you think and how well you manage to fulfill your to-do lists, something is still going to be rotten and self-harming in the way you progress. And he says, imagine trying to find your way through Chicago with a map of Detroit. You can think positively, you can be diligent, you can look at it carefully, it doesn't matter. You're still not going to get where you want to get because the map doesn't reflect the terrain. And in a sense, what the book of Mishlei is saying is exactly that. It says, if you want to live a good life, it's not enough to grab this good thing and grab this good thing. You have to have a map. And to have a map, to have an understanding of what the path is, you have to have wisdom. And to have wisdom, you have to have Irat Hashem. And this kind of leads us back to my debt from before about Greek philosophy. But before I go there, any questions or comments or ideas or thoughts?
I was just, oh, go ahead.
One idea that I had when you read about the wise woman was Eshet Chayil, and how everything in Eshet Chayil, how she has everything all prepared and all ready and has been industrious, and it kind of brought that image of the Eshet Chayil to mind.
Yeah, Eshet Chayil is from Mishlei. It's true. It's very much. It's not just from Proverbs. It's of a piece with the whole philosophy of life that Proverbs offer. It's true. That's true. Anything else, anybody?
I know you're about to wrap up, so I don't want to take up too much time. I think there's so much more to talk about. It's very powerful passages that you brought. One thing that I find striking is in the stupid, or I don't know how they kishu the contrast woman, that I don't get the sense that it's intentional in any way, that she's evil in any way, but more like not prepared, and it's sort of like sitting up high kind of in the house, sort of like the easy grab, not necessarily and this may also relate to like the false scales that you mentioned before as well. Like, it's not that they're necessarily cheating the scales and but maybe weighing the wrong things differently. And so therefore those scales are false. And so I guess I interpret it as the wise person is working with whatever those pillars are from the past, from the tradition, moving forward, with a lot of preparation and insight and thought into who might benefit and who might not benefit from the wisdom, whereas the other person is not necessarily intentionally trying to convince the simple person to go down the bad path, but is really maybe working under false assumptions, with the Detroit map instead of the Chicago map.
Yeah. No, exactly. I think you're right. I do want to say we don't have time to read the entire book, and I couldn't bring. There's some in the source sheet you can look later, but Mishlei does also talk about wickedness proper. It doesn't just leave us with this sense of just foolish people making foolish mistakes. It also very much has a sense of, it has this constant image of the evil woman who comes and tempts you off the road. It has the image in one of the passages you have in the source sheet, you can look at it. It has this image of the evil people are calling out to you to go with them in the road of wickedness and saying, oh, it'll be easy, you'll earn easy money. But be advised that wicked people only hurt themselves at the end, that in some way it just becomes self-damaging. You'll be hoisted on your own petard. So it's just to add that dimension. So before we finish, I see Ilana, I know we have to finish. I just want to say, just because I feel like I owe you about Greek philosophy from before, that Plato in his later dialogues, at first it's like all, reason, use your mind, think, question everything. But there's this pervasive sense in the dialogues that there has to be something in the beginning. Like you can't build a whole reasoning tree. You can't kind of reason about the world if there's not some axiomatic things that you just accept. And a lot of the tension of Greek philosophy and philosophy ever since, non-religious philosophy, has been, what is this something? When is it legitimate to say, I believe this because it's axiomatic and I don't need to prove this anymore? Whereas, no, this is something you have to keep questioning until you can reason about it and prove it using the powers of your own reason. But everybody has this sense that, like, reason in and of itself is a tool. There has to be some truth out there that you can hold on to. And different philosophers throughout history offer different answers as to what this truth is. But the basic urge, the basic instinct we all have as humans is that if we don't anchor our understanding of the world onto something that we get from without us, into some indisputable fact that's not the same as just an idea we happen upon, and something about the whole process is rotten. So we are lucky that we have Mishlei who tells us where this something is, whether we accept it or not, whether we take it or not, whether we light the candle or not, that is already for all of us to decide. And So I wish us much light in our life. What can I say?